Okay, so we're here with the Cage Warriors champ, Rhys Mckee. He's got a fight coming up. So obviously to get to this stage, there had to be a beginning. So what led you into MMA in the first place?
Yeah, so like many kids in this country, I started kicking a football. Played football at a decent level, like kind of under 14, under 15, so nothing senior. From there, I just went through the motions. Wasn't making much progress, and pre-season came up, and I fancied trying martial arts. There was a local gym with Rodney at the time, and I remember giving them or getting my dad to give them a phone call and see if I could call in, and done that, and I just got hooked. From there, it's I get beat up more than I beat anybody up, and I just hook, line and sinker, and a competition come up, and I think that was the first time I knew I'm not going back to football, and I never did.
Yeah, like that, a lot of people go into football, and it's a team sport, and like that, especially with going into MMA, you get out the work you put in. You're not relying on people aren't relying on you. But you said something interesting there, like you got beat up more than you were beating people up. What made you hooked about getting beaten up?
Yeah, I was never, like, people think of being a fighter and being a professional fighter that you must have grew up, fighting, and I never had a fight in my life. I never had confrontation. I avoided confrontation at all cost. And then I think when I went into MMA, I realised that I was very vulnerable, probably more vulnerable than I even believed I was. I knew I wasn't that able to defend myself if need be, but I didn't know I was that vulnerable. So when I started seeing it happening and seeing probably what could have happened if I wasn't skilled, it's probably scared me a bit. And in an egotistical way, I probably wanted to be capable to defend myself.
Yeah, because like that, they always say, like, it's better to know it and not use it than to not know it.
It's better to be a warrior in the garden than a gardener in the war.
Yeah, exactly. That, I think that's a joke. Well, it's not Joe Rogan, but everyone uses it. So going through there, so obviously you're with Rodney, you're going through, and like talk us through about, like, did you know you wanted to compete when you first started doing it, or? Yeah,
not at all. It's like, there's a wise tale in Rodney's a gym of like where you get this text from Rod, and it's he always says like, "Hi boy," and then he asks you to fight. And I remember getting my text and basically just asking what I fancy. He always calls it a run out. It's always made to sound less formal than what it actually is. He's like, "Do you fancy a run out on this date?" And I just happened to get that text about, "Do I fancy a run out?" But I never really, I didn't have aspirations to fight until after my first fight. So up until I was fighting, I never had that, like, I need to make my debut. It wasn't like that. It just very much happened. I was training, 7 days a week, multiple sessions a day. At this time I was 15. So I think it was very obvious for everybody else, but I just never entertained that thought. So Rodney did text me and he asked would I fancy making my debut, and at the time it was in Chaos. I made my debut as a flyweight, and that was it. Like, once I get that moment, then I kept training and all the fights started coming. But like until then, I never aimed to compete.
And then tell us what was that like, from not aiming to compete to stepping into Chaos, which is like, it's one of the promotions around here that I really like. It's on every year, like twice a year. Like going into Chaos, just tell us what it was like, the build-up coming up to the fight. Was there nerves? Was there excitement? What was it like? And then when you actually had to step in the cage and you're face-to-face with someone for the first time, what was that like?
You know what? Like, I can remember pretty much everything about it. Like, I remember seeing the poster going up online and thinking this is the coolest thing ever. I'm fighting someone and there's our pictures, and they're writing a bit of a bio about Rhys Mckee from Rodney's and Daniel Thompson from this gym, and I just thought it was so cool that like this was our moment. So training went well. I was probably very, very naive. No doubt I was very naive. Trained to the best of my ability. But once it came to fight night, and this is the thing, I can remember everything from that day. I can remember who I got there with. I can remember the car journey, the conversation. I remember the sound, the smell in the hall. I remember it, like literally remember it all. It's quite weird. But then the minute I stepped in, I just crapped myself, I suppose. It's I remember walking in and feeling like, I remember taking my t-shirt off as I went in and never feeling that sensation of the air hitting, like, my back with no t-shirt on. Like, I never trained with no t-shirt. Like, I was 16, never trained like that. So it was very new. And then I got in the cage and everybody was looking and the lights were hot and the sound, and it was just so surreal. And I remember Boydie at the time, who cornered me alongside Rodney, he shouted something and I was looking down, but it turned out it wasn't Boydie talking, it was Rodney. But I was so like like disorientated that I thought Rodney was talking through Boydie. It was so strange, and lo and behold, Daniel came in and, you know, he's giving me the mean mug stare, and I wanted anything else but being there. I just wanted to go home, and it lasted a minute and 31 seconds, and I got guillotined, and I was pretty glad to get out of that cage, to be honest.
Well, at least you're honest about it, because a lot of people wouldn't be so honest to say, especially fighters. I seen Darren Till had said it before, he didn't want to get into a fight in one of his things. So after you get guillotined, you felt like that. It feels like a strange situation, not situation, but it felt surreal for you, like you said, with your coaches talking and stuff like that. Then what made you want to go back for the second one, and then how did that go, the second one?
I remember crying like a baby backstage, and I think then it was probably when I knew. I was like, you know, I need to experience what it's like, and it was just very, like, again, it wasn't much of a thought process. Although, like, in the cage I was so uncomfortable, I knew it would never happen again. But I think I needed to answer the question if I could get over it more than anything. Like, I feel like surely everybody couldn't be this nervous. Everybody couldn't feel like this, because if they did, nobody would do it.
Yeah.
So I owed it to myself then, and I just started training again, 16, 17 now at the stage, like a demon, just doing as much as I could. And like at that stage I was having a lot of success. Like, amateur fighters were coming down to the club to train, and like in the nicest way possible, I would get my way with them. And then pro fighters come down. At this stage I'm only like 1-0 or 0-1, sorry, and you know, like, I'm having success with them. So I just knew I owed it to myself. And then I did get another fight matched up, and I remember it was just the best feeling ever.
Because you obviously went on, I think you went on a little streak then. And
I went on a tear. I was like won my next 6, or and like I started like dropping people, like knocking them out, and I was like, flip. Like, I'm a 17-year-old, but like I remember thinking I was so powerful. I was like, this is amazing, and it was really, really, really fun. And you know, I was never egotistical. I respected everyone and never wanted to hurt anyone, but really, really enjoyed dropping people.
well, that's part and parcel of the game, and like I said, at 17, like if you look at now compared to then, with the way the amateurs is so safe, it seemed a little bit out there. Like, were you fighting like grown men in their 30s, late 20s, stuff like that? Is that not like, when you're going into that, is that not kind of like what, like this, like, because obviously they're fully grown men, you're still kind of growing into yourself at that stage. Like, is that not a bit off-putting as well?
I really think I enjoyed it. I remember I fought at a show, I think it was their last ever show, Immortal. They run a show in Donegal, and I fought a fella, and the original opponent pulled out, so they got this guy to step in. And I remember walking in the car park of the hotel, and I'd never seen the guy who was fighting. I knew he had tattoos, which at the time I didn't, but now I do. At the time I didn't. And he drove in on like a Beamer, like a 3 Series BMW, and I was like, this boy drives. And I actually remember we near walked out in front of his car, and like at that moment, that was another one of them, like, do you want it or do you not? And I was like, this is class. I'm gonna like beat up a guy who drives, he tattoos, probably a family, like, and I really enjoyed that. I really enjoyed that. So for me, it definitely didn't faze me. In fact, like I kind of liked it, if I'm being honest.
That's good. And then, like, to end your amateur career, you actually went out and you were in a tournament that you fought twice in one night, which links into your pro debut. But how did it feel to, like, because the tournaments are slightly coming back now, I see, into the amateur game. What was it like to fight in a tournament, fighting twice in one night, and then to end up winning, and that was the end of your amateur career? I
have a lot of time for tournaments. You know, I think they play their part, and I think if the fighter's the right level and, you know, has a lot of skin in the game, then it's sensible. I think for younger fighters, it might not be the smartest idea, because it can go very, very bad. And even like if the medical things aren't up to scratch, you know, like you can take a lot of damage in your first fight and still fight in the second. So you need to be careful doing them. But at the time I done them, I remember I found it like an experiment. And I remember I sparred 4 3-minute rounds at the time. Took 45 minutes, no sparring, just resting, and then sparred another 4 rounds. So I loved the, like, how will I feel? How do I try and mimic this? And see, to be honest, the time we done the fight, it wasn't exactly like that. I went out, I done 2 rounds. It was the guy Valderm, who was 9-1 or 9-0 at the time. Nobody wanted to touch him, and I knocked him out in the second. And then went back, sat for 2.5 hours probably, and then fought Owen Drungill in the final and beat him. So it was, I got, the experiment was answered. And but again, like, I think part of me as a person is I'm very curious and need to know about stuff, and you know, I need to know how I feel when I do certain stuff, and that was just a game, I suppose, or an experiment. Which
obviously you passed with flying colours. And then, did you know then that was going to be the end of your amateur? Or
Like I was always hounding Rod. I was always like, there's a thing in Rodney's where you have a red T-shirt, and the red T-shirt's your pro T-shirt. It's a big deal. Like it's your black belt effectively of MMA. And remember hounding Rodney when can order a red T-shirt and whatnot. And no, so like at the time it wasn't officially set that I was going to win this and then go. Nor was it even really talked about. It was just at the time I was working a full-time job. And again, another one of them Rodney texts that came through 8 days before what would have been my pro debut in Bama.
Yeah, which links into your last amateur fight because he actually cornered the opponent. And then you went into John Redmond. And then looking back and looking through articles on this, no one wanted you to take that fight. Everyone thought you were crazy. I know his record, I think he had a losing record at the time when it happened. But Johnny is still Johnny, and Johnny is a firefight. Like to go in as your debut against someone like that, like you obviously trusted in Rodney, trusted in you, and you obviously trusted in Rodney to go ahead like that. Mm-hmm. What was everything going around? Were people saying to you, "You crazy"? Like what was the?
So like that? I remember at the time, John was 5-9, so he had 14 pro fights, which at the time for me, like, I never even thought at that time. I did think I would go pro, but I never even knew if I had 14 or 15 pro fights in my whole career. But he had a lot of fights, so I was never really that worried. Like I seen John and knew he was a character and knew he had a social media thing, so he was bigger than he was, if that makes sense. And no disrespect to him, but I just knew he wasn't as good as his image was. So Rod texted me and he said, "How fit are you at the time?" And like at that age and playing sport my whole life, I was always kind of fit. So he said, "Do you fancy doing 5-minute rounds?" And that was like, oh, that must be pro, and it must be time for the red tape. And I was like, 100%. I was like, yep, when is it? He was like, next Saturday in the Free Arena. I was like, sure, what better way to do it? And at that time, I was just off a featherweight fight, and this fight was at welterweight, which was my pro debut, and I had no right fighting at welterweight at that time. Like, I couldn't even have weighed welterweight on my heaviest day. I probably walked at 74 kilo at the time, and took the fight, and just remember there was a buzz, and I remember Rodney get ridiculed, and I get ridiculed, and what does Rodney think he's doing this? And Rodney just was very silent, and Rodney's a very calculated man. He doesn't make decisions on a whim, and sometimes people probably confuse his sense of quiet as a mistake, but he was confident and he knew what I can do. And he's seen me beat up pros coming from other gyms for years. He's seen it all happen. He knew what I was capable of. I ran through everyone in the amateur scene pretty much. So it was the time, and he trusted it. And together we laughed about it, and it all played part on that night. Like it happened to John too.
Yes, like that was like to come in at that. If you seen that happening now, I'd probably be the same and be like, "What's going on here?" But obviously, Rodney trusted you. Like he knew your skills, you knew your skills going in, and what was going to happen. But like, so talk through. You told me about your first amateur fight. What it was like going in? So going into like the Tree Arena for your pro debut was a pretty big deal on Bama. Like, what was that like? Obviously, there's going to be more crowd. Like, or did any of that phase you at the time?
You know what? Like, I was always like, and I'm not like, I'm not blowing my praises or anything, but like, I was always like a duck to water. Like, I've never found anything a mad transition. Like, I've never, like, bar that first amateur fight, I've never, like, none of it I've ever got anywhere and thought, flip, this isn't for me. Yeah. I remember, like when I was fighting the Free Arena against John, I was home for 1:30 and in bed. Like, I remember just flicking through my phone and Facebook after the fight. Like, that's how casual it was. It wasn't like, it wasn't an after party, and it wasn't like a big event and we stayed. It wasn't like that. It was very casual. I'm just going to fight on a Saturday night and go home. So like before the event, I knew it was an arena show. I knew the walkout song would be a bit louder, but it was all like very much for me. It was very like natural. So like, as unfortunately it's a boring answer, but like none of it really fazed me whatsoever. I just knew. I was like, this is fun. I enjoyed it a lot. Don't get me wrong, I really enjoyed it. But like, there was never a point where I was like, flip, this is a bit big.
Yeah, so like you felt at home basically in the whole situation, like to go home and just casually scrolling through Facebook. Yeah. Right, I'm going to bed now.
That was it, and it was as casual as that. And I woke up the next day and showed the fight to my family and went for Sunday lunch probably. Like, it was just very casual. Like,
going on from that, you went on a bit of a run then as well, like you did in your amateur career. And then so you went on a bit of a run, and then you actually came to your first loss. Talk to us what it's like as a fighter? Because obviously you had lost as amateur, but to lose as a pro, did it mean more? Did it mean less? And what do you athletes go through when you get lost? Because I don't think people understand. They see the 15 minutes or whatever it is, and then because they don't see what you've done for the months, the years, and then how does that affect you, like going into your next couple of weeks and your next camp?
Yeah, well, funny. I picked up the title. I fought Jai Herbert to go 5-0. And then Bama announced at the time they were coming back to Belfast, which of course was like, right, well, that's where you're defending. And it was all fine. Had a perfect fight camp, everything hunky-dory, like couldn't have went better. You know, sold maybe over 200 tickets at the time, and, you know, it was all good. And then I woke up on fight day and I was just like, I went home after the weigh-in and I went to bed, which was very strange. And like Rebecca at the time was like, we always went for dinner on like the Friday night, which was weigh-in night, and you know.
So you can start eating again.
Of course, like you're fighting tomorrow. It's a big event. You sold over 200 tickets. Everyone's there. And I just like lay in bed, and I remember like waking up, and Rebecca's like, "Do you want to go get food?" And I was like, no chance. I just felt so ill. I was so sick, and then forced myself to go eat food to try and force this normal feeling back, and that was all right. Couldn't eat anything. Didn't eat. Starting to be sick. Woke up on fight day, and you know that feeling like before you open your eyes, where you're like, I'm going to open my eyes and everything's going to be fine. It's fight day. Like fight day is a big day for a fighter. Like anybody will know. It's like you wake up on fight day and you just feel like Superman. I did not feel like Superman. I felt like I was dying. You know, being sick, being ill other ways without going into it too much, but like. I couldn't drink any water or it came out. I couldn't eat any food. Even the thought of food made me be sick. And you know, I have a situation then that we're like 7 hours from fight night. What do I do? Do I fight? Do I not? At the time, of course I'm going to fight. And you know, I remember getting to the arena in Belfast. Everyone there. People started knowing I was sick. And that night was just never going to end well. I remember talking to Rodney backstage, and I think Rodney's still a wee bit guilty for this. Not like I don't find him guilty. I think he feels guilty for it. We talked, and I said, listen, I'm going to go out and try and flatline him in 5 minutes. Like in that first round, that's all I have. Like I didn't warm up, didn't take my coat off until we were walking out. I remember we forgot to put my sponsor t-shirt on because I had the coat. And I said, I need to change this t-shirt. But even the thought of taking my jacket off to put a t-shirt on made me stress. So when I blew the tank for 4 or 5 minutes, had nothing there, and Tim Burnett finished me. And at the end of the last second in the round, with a knee in Belfast, and I was gutted, but I put myself in that position. Like that annoyed me more than anything. You know, there was nothing I could do. I was just sick and. Like genuinely sick, not like one of these ones.
I had a stomach ache.
Like this was like, you know, I went till when I weighed in the day before, I was 155, which was championship weight as a title fight. The day of the fight, I was 156. Like.
Yeah, you should be putting on.
Yeah, I mean, I normally would have been back in there at 172 at that stage of my career, like 172, like 16, 17 pound, and I put 1 pound on. Next day I had a broken orbital on my face, and then I had to go get IVs the day after the fight. So just quite a hard time in my life, you know. And I was 5-0, I was finishing everybody, I was untouchable, you know. Is he going to go to the UFC before he even has to do anything? And at this stage I'm only 5-0, it's so early. But like you buy into your own hype, of course. And I remember after that loss, me and Rebecca went and stayed in a wee quiet hotel in Portrush, which is up the coast, and just like kind of hid for a few days. Like not hid because there was that massive media demand or anything like that, but just needed a break. I was like 21, 22, and you know, felt like the world was crumbling off something that's so small when you look at my career now, but at the time it was a big deal. So we hid there for a few days, and then I think, you know, when my stomach was normal and I was able to eat food and drink food and not go to the toilet every 90 seconds, you know, I came back to normal life and felt less sorry for myself.
Yeah, and then obviously with that, you've obviously learned from that, because obviously at the time you would have said that you felt like your world was crumbling. Have you taken that experience and brought it forward? Because obviously there's more losses that come further down the line too, which we're going to get onto fairly soon. But did you take that experience and feel like it's not the be all and end all? It is a shit part of the game, but it is what it is.
Yeah, of course, you know. And like I always I never wanted to be a Floyd Mayweather who was or like undefeated his whole career. Like, it's not what it's about for me. Like, I want to fight the best fighters and prove that I'm better than them. And you know, on a certain night, if I come up a bit short, then I'm just not better than him on that night at that time. So, yeah, like I very much accept it now. You know, defeat is a very readily available option. It's not my first choice by any means, but at some nights you're going to meet a man that's better than you, and that's just the way it is. Like, I mean, I definitely learned a lot from that fight. I learned not to put myself in positions that doesn't help. You know, I believe me and Tim Burnett rematched 2 or 3 fights after, and it went exactly how I knew it would. But at that time, I put myself in a very vulnerable position, and you know, I've got a tattoo on my leg and it says the sufferer must help himself. And it's, you know, if you're not prepared to help yourself and make these decisions for yourself, then you're a lost cause.
Yeah, well, that's good. That's like, because you had belts in Barma. Barma eventually just obviously folded. And then what were you thinking then? Like, were you like, where will I go? Bellator, just Cage Warriors? Yes. Like, what was it like for just to fold like that? And then with the options, like, were you ever uncertain about where you were going next?
Yeah, like, that was a strange like time in my career. Like, one I've never actually talked about. Like, Bama at the time was like just where I worked. Like, you know, same as anybody works a job at Tesco or anything. Like, Bama was my place of work, and I had the world title, and then I lost. I was the very last fight in Bama, technically. Me and Terry is the title fight. He took the title off me, so I'm coming off a loss. And then it's like, where do you go? So we had conversation with like ACB at the time. It was a Russian crowd, and I didn't really dig that. We had conversations with a few European ones. Obviously, they're not that big because I can't even remember who they are. We talked to KSW at the time, and it very much nearly did work, which still excited me, or I'm still excited even thinking about what could have been. But Cage Warriors, then Graham Boylan messaged me and just said, "Listen, if you need a new home, the yellow gloves are ready for you." And I think at that time I was training, and I was just like, you know what, let's do it. And you know, it was never real. I knew what I wanted, and that was the UFC. So Bellator and stuff never really entered my mind. We had offers from Bellator and stuff, and we didn't even. I don't even know how nice they were, but I'm sure they would have been good. But we weren't even interested. Like, it was the long game, and the UFC was always the way I was looking.
Yeah, because obviously Cage Warriors is a great, like, you look at the champions that have gone there, the likes of Conor, Bisping, like everyone who's moved on, and obviously you moved on there eventually. So when you go into Cage Warriors and you start winning, and then talk us what's true, like, because you see everyone going, oh, Uncle Dana, ring me. How does a UFC call actually come, right? And that was your end goal. How did you feel when it came?
Yeah, like, I mean, I knew I was doing all the work, so like, you know, I remember I was like putting people away like pretty handily too. Like, I didn't feel like I was really stressing too much. And then lockdown happened at that time, and we weren't really training, like doing bits and pieces. But I had a conversation with Graham before that because I signed his management, which I never was before. And then I'll just be really honest, and I'm not hippie by any way, or I don't believe in like certain mad things, but I had this feeling that I would fight in this thing called Fight Island. I just had this feeling, like, and I'm not that person. I'm not spiritual. I don't believe in wacky stuff or anything. It's not me. But I had a feeling, and I knew part of that deal would require me to sign with Graham, and maybe that was to be in his nest or to be in, you know, his conversations. And lo and behold, I signed that contract with Graham, and 2 weeks later he FaceTimed me. So I was just back from training. It was exactly 12 weeks before I was due to fight Adam Proctor in Manchester for the welterweight title. And Graham said he was going to message to give me an interview, which now looking back, it's like, what did I really think? I remember people asking, did I know? But I just not admitting it. And I was like, I genuinely didn't know. Like, I can't even remember having like, oh, I wonder, is it this?
Yeah.
Like, I didn't have that, which surprised me because I'm very, like, you know, if Graham texts me now, I'm still like, oh, is this?
Yeah.
You know, but at the time I just wasn't. I think because the fight contract was signed, I signed a contract with Proctor. And then, so it's just back. It was first training camp. We were having a barbecue, me and Rebecca, a real nice sunny day. Again, we're in lockdown, so as much as I have this feeling, I'm still not on the waiting for the call. And then Graham pops up and he was asking me about short notice stuff and about fights, blah blah blah. And he was like, "How would you, or what would you say if someone offered you?" And I was like, "Yeah, I would do it." But like, And then I think at this moment, he was like, "Will you may pack your bags?" And I was like, "Flip, this is like I remember like that was a very like third dimension or like third person view where like sucked out of my car for a minute. I'm like this is just like insane. It's all like it was just very, very real." And yeah, like that was it. And it just turned into this real whirlwind for the next 24 hours. It got released at the UFC that was on that night. So I get, like, in my mind, I get signed at like 5 or 6 o'clock when I found from Graham. At midnight, I wake up to my phone buzzing, being tagged. Rhys Mckee is fighting Hamzat Chimaev, and it was just like it was pretty insane, but again, pretty cool. Like pretty much everything I signed up for. Like when that's what I wanted. That's what I wanted, if that makes sense. Yeah, I love the madness. I love the mayhem. I love the John Rebnan fights where he's not meant to win. I love the last minute sign-ins, and you know what I mean.
Yeah, it all seems like a bit of craziness in your career so far. But that, then you're going in. Obviously, you said you're going to have a barbecue. Obviously, you said you weren't near the weight, so obviously, I would assume you didn't have that barbecue.
Didn't have the barbecue.
How far off the weight was it? How much did you know about your opponent, and how easy was it to get the weight down?
So, first question was, I remember I said to Graham, I was like, "Who is it? Like who is he?" And it's in the video. I've never watched that video back because I cry, and I'm like, I can't watch it back, and it makes me cringe a bit. But anyway, I've never watched it. I remember at the time thinking he said Kamikaze, like that was just in my mind. I was like, I've never heard of someone in the UFC called Kamikaze, but it turns out it was Kamzat. But again, that's probably how emotional I was.
Yeah.
So like, there was these few hours where I was like Googling like UFC Kamikaze, like whatever. I remember talking to a few people and seeing like Decky and stuff at the time, and he was like, "It's not the boy that fought John Phillips last weekend." And I was like, "No, he's a middleweight. Like I don't think it's him." And you know, I then text Graham, I believe, or rung him and said, "Who did you say it was?" And he's like, "Oh, Hamzat." I said, "Oh, okay." And then I looked him up, but I'd never heard of Hamzat before, or never watched his fight with John Phillips. Didn't watch it until after the fight of me and him anyway, like when I watched it. Because at that time, it's done, like it's signed, it's not really going to change anything. Although my opinions have changed a bit more, I probably would have watched it. But yeah, I really didn't know who it was. Didn't know anything about him. So the weight, I think at the time I was 187. When I look back, I walked pretty light at that time. So 170 was pretty easy, and I feel like my body like was so like riled up with the fight and stuff. Like my appetite was crap all week, so the weight just fell off. And like I think in Abu Dhabi at the time I'd done one session of sweating. I didn't even use a bath. That's how easy it was to get to the weight. But I feel like the body was just like probably wasn't eating as much with being the feelings, but no, weight was easy. That was the last thing on my mind, to be honest.
And then when you get in there, I know it was on Fight Island, so it didn't have all the Vegas rings and bells and whistles. Like, what was it like stepping into a UFC cage and then seeing him? And obviously, we all know what happened. Like, looking back on that now, like, you're like, Rhys got a bit of a bad go on the UFC, you know, with the two fights, I think, because your second one was a lot more competitive. What was it like stepping into the UFC cage and being backstage?
Yeah, like, again, like, boring answer, but it was so normal. Like I just did not feel. Like, you know, I remember like UFC staff coming up and handing me T-shirts and like, wear this at this time and wear this here, and you know, other people might be like, "Oh, this is cool." I was never like, "This is cool." I'm like, "Yeah, cool, thanks." Like, not like an ungrateful little shit or anything, but like I just felt like, yeah, of course I'm in the UFC now. Like this is what happens. Like, you know, you win fights, you come here, and this is what happens. So, you know. Very, very normal, but amazing to be there. Like very proud, like insanely proud to be there. Like, you know, at this time, your articles from home, and every Irish MMA report in the country is looking for an interview, which is, you know, the support the Irish give their own. So it was all like very cool, but again, like, yeah, like my mindset was like, yeah, this is my time now, and I'm here now. So then I remember after or before the weigh-ins, we got to go see the arena. And stand up beside the cage at that time. We didn't go in it, but yeah, it was just so nice. But it was just so like this just makes sense. Like it just is normal. And seeing, like, I think at the time it was Laura Sanko. At the time I didn't know who it was, but now I know who it was. And there's the girl from TV. And you know, you've seen the reporters. Maybe at the time it was Paul Felder and stuff up in the box, like doing interviews. And I was that's a thing I really probably like about myself. I'm not really starstruck by anyone, and met Dana or not Dana, Sean, and it was cool. Like it was very cool, but just nothing to get me that nothing.
Yeah.
No one scared me. Like I got scared of the flyweight at my debut.
Yeah, no, I don't. I think after that scare, I don't think anything else is scary. Obviously, when you finished that fight and obviously you went away, how did you feel after that? Did you think, right, were you actually signed for just a one fight? Did you get multi-fight, or were they giving you a shot and then see how that went and give you another shot?
It was a 4-fight contract, which in hindsight we know doesn't mean 4 fights, but after the fight and stuff, like, you know, I was never there to lose. I was there to win. You know, conditions and how I trained before definitely didn't help. You know, all that stuff. But I lost the fight. I was got it. Like when I lose any fight, you know, I got it. It was no different. But it was very much like, you know, a lot of people have this mentality. Oh, well, at least you're in now. And I was like, yeah, fair enough. But I've lost. So it was all eyes on the next one. And I said to Graham, you know, that fight was in July. I was like, I want to go soon. Like, I want to like rewrite this. So I ended up getting a fight in September, which is another thing with hindsight. I would change so much. I see these fighters getting in the UFC now on short notice, and next thing you know, for their next fight, they happen to be injured and they prolong their next fight. I tell you exactly what they're doing. Them boys are training in the wings, knowing that they're not having to just go in straight away and risk getting another loss, because we all know what happens if you get 2 or 3 in a row. I probably would have played the game in hindsight, like if I could, but I didn't. So I fought I got the fight in September. I got the news of the fight in September, and then I fought in November. So July to November, not a lot of time for 2 UFC fights, you know. And but mindset and stuff wise, like going into the next one, in my mind, I was going to knock him stone dead, and again, circumstances probably didn't help that one either, and it just all built to this perfect storm, and that storm was me eventually getting caught.
And then, like you said, once you were there, everything felt normal. It felt like you've been winning on Barma, you were winning on Cage Warriors. This was the next step. So what was that like for that next step? When, obviously, like you said, 4 fights doesn't mean 4 fights. When that's pulled from underneath you, like, what's that feeling like? Like, are you thinking, I'm not going back to Cage Warriors? I'm not, like, did you have an air about you that, like, well, I've been here, so I'm not going back? And how did it make you feel? Like, 'cause that's everyone's dream. Like, your dream is gone. Obviously, you didn't perform. Well, not that you didn't perform. Obviously, Hamzat was an anomaly that no one knew about really at the time. He was on his way up. The second fight was closer, and then I think it was a bit of a rough go that you got. But how did that make you feel that it's gone now?
So I remember walking back to the change rooms with the Morano fight, and like I'm so beat up. Like I remember my lip was sat like it was horrendous, the shape I was in. And I remember saying to like Rodney and Ryan at the time, I was like, "That's me cut 100%," and they were like, "No chance, no way, like you'll not be cut." But in my mind, like I was like, "Yeah, I was just accepting that I would be cut," and like then I went home, and you know, a few months passed or a few weeks, and it's like nobody knows what they're doing. It's like loads of fighters in this position where like you're not cut. People think you're cut the day after you fight, or the day after you lose. You're not. The UFC don't work like that. They have little, you know, they have meetings, and then they make their calls and their cuts. So like I'll tell you that it was November 14th I fought, and I believe I was cut on December 16th. So I mean it's 4 or 5 weeks, so a month and a half, 2 months. And I remember I was driving out of my estate to come here, funny enough, to get internet installed. And I got a text from Graham, and he said, "You free?" And I was like, "Yeah." And he just texted me and said, "Good news and bad news." And I was like, "Oh shit, here we go."
That's really just a bad news text, isn't it?
Yeah, there's no good news. The good news part of it was they want you to go and develop, but let's be honest, that was a day wrecker. And yeah, like it was very, very hard. I remember saying to Rodney and Ryan, we were back in Vegas, if I'm cut, I'm not going back to Cage Warriors. There's just this, like, I don't know what I'm going to do. Like not I don't know what I'm going to do in a way where I like, this is the end of my life.
Yeah.
But like fight wise, I was like, I don't know if I'd be that motivated to go back. And then, yeah, so got caught, dealt with that. Very shit few weeks, you know, before Christmas wasn't ideal. Not that it would have made a difference. But then I took a lot of time off, took a year off, like trained, got like this realization of like real life and like, you know, what are you going to do? Like just lie down and be like, you know, what are you going to do? Lie down and just not fight again? And It was never for me, so I had conversations with Graham and, you know, talked about options, and lo and behold, I went back to Cage Warriors.
So obviously, with your last fight, you fought at the SSE. Tell us what that fight was like. It was a fight with like a lot of heart, and like it was a whirlwind. What was it like? What's it like for a fighter up north to fight at the SSE, and what was your feeling after that fight?
Yeah, like to fight in the SSE as someone from the country, like it's magic, you know. I couldn't tell you how many times I've been there as a kid, how many things I've watched, how many times I've stood in the same aisles that everybody else watched the fight. Like, amazing venue. So to headline it, like, was unbelievable. And then the fight it was, and like how many tickets I sold. It's just a mad event. The run up was perfect and mad and crazy, and you know, it was good. But when I won the fight, like, I remember just thinking, like, this will be hard to beat, and I stand by that. Like, you know, I'll fight in the MGM, I'll fight in the T-Mobile, wherever it is in Vegas or whatever country in the world, like, and Belfast will be hard to top. You know, it was just amazing, like, really, really magic. The fight, you know, from the depths of defeat to nearly winning to losing again to then get your big punch moment. And it's just like, if you've seen that fight in a Rocky movie, you wouldn't be confused. Like, it would make sense for a Rocky movie. And yeah, it was mad. Took a lot of punishment, gave a lot of punishment, showed more strings to my arsenal than I ever have, and walked away with a strap. So that was the main thing.
Yeah, it was a roller coaster. Like you said, if that was in a movie, you'd be like, that wouldn't happen in real life.
Totally.
But that was a real life fight that really happened that you can all watch. You can all watch back. So I'm gonna because obviously you have the fight coming up. You're going to be fighting Judo Jimmy. He's got quite next year. I think he's fighting since like 2005 or something. Yeah. So that's going to be another test for you. We look forward to that. But two questions before I let you go. One is, what would be your favourite finish? I think we have your favourite fight would be the last one, I would presume. Or what would be a fight that you learned from the most, and what would be your favourite finish?
Favourite, I mean, yeah, you're right with the favourite fight. Favourite finish. Favourite finish, I fought Jai Herbert, and it was a time after my dad died, and that fight was like 8 weeks after, and I remember thinking that fight was real make or break time. It was like left or right in the road, and I beat him, but like it was a hard fight, and I remember thinking, flip, I don't know if I'll do this, and I caught him like the sweetest of left hands, and I remember being so relieved he went down. But I think with the whole scenario and the build-up and the whole arena was behind me that night, so I think that's my favourite finish for obvious reasons. My favourite fight, you know what? The one I learned the most from. It's a really tough question.
Would it be your first one, maybe?
You know what? I think there was a lot of lessons in my first fight, for sure. I think every fight I learned something from. I could give you a lesson from each and every single fight. You know, I learned a lot from the Justin one, learned a lot from the Mckee, that whatever fight it was. The very first fight, you're right. You're not wrong. Like that's probably the biggest lesson ever, and the first pro fight as well, because you like learn that you're more powerful than you probably believe. So, a lot of lessons in fights. A lot of lessons. Yeah,
it sounds like that first amateur fight set the tone for the rest. It set you up for the rest of the way it went on. One more question before we go. When you're finished fighting, what would you like to be known for your legacy as a person? So it doesn't have to be as a fighter, as a person. What would you like people to remember you for when it's all said and done?
Yeah, I think like when it's all said and done and wrote, I want kids of Northern Ireland and Ireland to look at me and be like, well, he done it, you know, and I'm not raised from a background of money. I'm not raised from anything being handed out or given. Everything's earned, nothing given, and I want to be known as one of the flag bearers for the people that like really did make it out of like hard work and effort and grit and determination. That's what I want to be known. That I want to be one of Ireland's greatest ever sportsmen. You know, when people talk about George Best or Conor McGregor or Carl Frampton or up north or south, I want people to say Rhys Mckee, and for me that's what legacy will be. And you know, we're well on the way to writing it, so a few more chapters just to stamp in here.
Perfect. It's been a good few chapters so far, and I can't wait to see the rest. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.